What's good? What's good? What's good? What's good, family? What's happening? It's Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Y'all excited it's Friday, man? Are y'all excited? Are y'all just glad that it's Friday? What's happening with you, Alvin? Good to see you, man. What's good, Delante? Good to see you, bruh. What you say? Uh, B, of course you would be on here the day when your fellow alum, the week rather that your fellow alum has been nominated to the vice presidency. Of course, you would show up to support your fellow alum. Good to see you, man. What's going on, Delante? Good to see you, man. Good to see y'all. Thank y'all for being here. Y'all. Like I said, thank God it's Friday, man. I don't know how many of y'all are excited that it's Friday, man, but I'm absolutely just ecstatic that it's Friday. I'm going to move this overlay out the way real quick because I want to show Alvin. Uh, I'm on another another label, man. This says Faith Got Me Living Risky. I'll let you know what that's about. Uh, later on, man. But I think we got another one we can work with. The only problem with them is they're not as quick in their shipping as AOH, man. But I like some of the stuff that they got over there on their site. So a lot of good news this week. The whole Kamala deal being on the ticket with Biden. If anybody knows me, I've called the Biden Harris ticket from day one, even while they were still running against each other. I was calling the Biden Harris ticket because I believe that was certainly a winning ticket. So I'm excited about that, but we're not going to talk about that this week. I want to pick up where I left off last week when I was sharing my story. When we talked about fighting to get back home, because a lot of people reached out to me after that. A lot of people reached out to me after that, and they appreciated the fact that I was willing to be vulnerable and share my story. And so that they could hear about the journey. And so I appreciate everybody's support. So when we talked last week, we talked about how I was going through this issue and how I was in Iraq and how Iraq was Iraq was the physical manifestation of where I was spiritually. And so then, after that, I get home and I'm dealing with all the stuff that comes with being separated from your family for a length of time. And what happened, honestly, uh, the 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 um, the physical separation that I had due to being deployed would eventually lead to a spiritual separation. My physical separation from the family would eventually lead into a spiritual separation, because when I got back, I really felt ostracized. I felt like nobody cared. There's the link, y'all. If y'all want to tap into the show, y'all can. Um, but that physical separation led to a spiritual separation, that manifested itself in my relationship, because I got to a point where I felt like I was not needed. I got to a point where I felt like nobody cared, and really it led into some destructive behaviors. And I believe last week I brought you all up to 2007. I'd been out of the military. By that time, I'd been out of the military about 4 years. I went through a period of unemployment from the time that I got out till about 2004. Got hired on, working contract work. Then I got an opportunity to work for the federal government in my field of law enforcement. And so, I took that move, or rather that job took us to Savannah, where we stayed for a number of years. And then I would then move from Savannah back to my hometown. And as I'm looking at all of this now, a lot of the stuff that was happening physically in my life was going to be representative of where I was spiritually. Iraq. I was in a strange place, in a desert place, surrounded by enemy, no support. That's where I was spiritually when I went to Iraq. That's where I would be when I came home. Now I'm back home. I'm separated. I'd been separated from my family physically. Now I'm separated from them emotionally. I'm separated from them spiritually. I'm separated from them mentally. There's a separation. And then we moved back to my hometown. And what I did not know was me moving back to my hometown would start my journey back home, would start my journey back to my place of faith, would start my journey back to my recovery, would start my return back to a sense of normalcy, of who I was, or who I am. And so in 2007, we moved back to my hometown. By the time we moved back to my hometown, I'm destroyed. I'm beat up. I'm tired at this point. I'm detached from my family. There's no real connection between my wife and myself. There's no real connection between my daughter and me. I'm really detached. And so now I'm going home. Remember, I don't know if y'all remember this when we talked about it in the entanglement episode, but I talked about, toxicity, or not the entanglement episode, when we talked about, toxicity. If you don't clean up the toxicity in this space, then when you move to a sterile area, you will take that toxicity with you and infect that area. Well, what had happened to me, I settled into toxicity in Columbus, Georgia. I took that toxicity with me in Savannah. And so that whole situation was toxic. And I still have not purged myself. I still have not cleansed myself of this toxicity. So I take it with me to my hometown. The thing that helped me in this toxic thing. The thing that helped me was there were people there in my hometown who God had already placed. What I didn't realize that now I realize looking back over it, God put a lot of things in place for me to make my road back home. And so when I got back home, when I got back to my hometown, God had already had people in place who they didn't know and who I didn't know would be there to help cleanse me of my toxicity. He already had a cleaning station waiting for me. All I needed to do was arrive at the cleaning station. I would go through the cleaning station and they would help me rid myself of the toxicity so that it does not continue to travel with me. So 2007, I get back home. I'm hurt. I'm broken. My marriage is in disarray. My house is in disarray. I'm back home in a familiar land, in a familiar place. I'm there close to my parents, and they can see me physically, but they could tell it is not me. And so I'm really trying to, work through this. And at this point, I'm now trying to be better than what I was. I'm at least giving it an effort. And this is the thing that helped me start my journey back home. We go back to the church that I grew up in. And at that church, there had been this explosion, if you will, of young adults. And at this time, I'm in my mid-20s. But these are not just any young adult, right? These are these are young married couples. These are people who are my age. And again, these are people that I know. These are people that I'm familiar with, but they're my age. They're married. And by all accounts, they look happy married. Now I need you to understand, I'm coming from an environment in the military where, when I was single, we had to run dudes out of the barracks because they would have rather spent time at the barracks than to spend time at home. We would tell them, listen, man, you married, you got to go home. The barracks is for the single guys. You can't do what we do. And so, I came from an environment where if I'm honest with you, fidelity and all the stuff that we talk about in the church was not mentioned. Those were not the core values of the military. And so I saw guys who, and I hung around guys who were, they did any and everything. Let me say it like that. And these were older guys and, some guys my age. And so even though I knew what to do, sometimes the company that you hang around has greater influence than the stuff that you've grown up with. And so, when I get back to my hometown, I now see guys who I grew up with, who I knew, and I see them involved in the church, and they, from all accounts, have happy marriages. And the thing that helped me start my journey back home was I had a desire to hang out with those guys. But in my current state, I was too embarrassed to hang out with them because my life, my marriage did not look like theirs. And so my desire to be with them, my desire to see what they had, or to have what they had, my desire to be happy with my wife the way that they were happy with their wives, that was the thing that started me on my journey back home, because I wanted to be in a place where I belonged. I wanted to feel like I belonged to something. I wanted to feel like somebody cared about me. And what I love about this thing is those guys helped me to understand that my marriage did not have to be right in order for me to be with them. That if I would come and be with them, they would help my marriage get right. That's why I tell people a lot of times, especially when you talk about the story of the prodigal son, you don't have to go home. You don't have to be right to go home. You can go home so you can get right. And so with me and in that moment, what they helped me to understand is, we're not perfect. We don't have it all together, but we're all helping each other work this thing out. And so your marriage does not have to be right to hang out with us. Come and hang out with us, and we will help your marriage get right. We will help you be better. And so here was a group of guys that did not know about my struggle, did not know what I was going in. They took me on face value for who I was, them seeing me just as for who they knew me to be. And so they bring me in and they accepted me, and they gave me a place to belong. And when they gave me a place to belong, then I started on this road going back home, because all I wanted was for somebody to accept me, because in my mind, I had been rejected by everything and all the things, everybody and everything that I loved. Remember, I had to leave the military. I had only 30 days to get out. They didn't care about me. They sent me back home. You figure out when you get back home, all we know is you have to be out in 30 days. So the thing that I had devoted my life to for the last 8.5 years, now it was throwing me away. And now here I am. I'm in this spiritual battle. I have survived physical combat, but I was losing. I was dying in the spiritual battle. And so when I come back home after being moved out of the military, now I'm home, and now my house seems as if they're rejecting me. It seems like nobody needs me, nobody cares about me, and so everything and everybody that I loved and that I cared about, it seemed that they did not care about me anymore. And so all I wanted in that moment was I wanted somebody to see me. I wanted somebody to make me feel as if I cared. I wanted somebody to make me believe that I was still important. And this is the thing. Like I said, I started doing destructive behaviors because this is a true saying. Negative attention is still attention. Negative attention is still attention. And if I have to do destructive behaviors in order for you to see me, then I will do destructive behaviors because I need somebody to acknowledge my presence. I need somebody to acknowledge that they care about me. I need somebody to acknowledge that I was still important. And so, in that moment, now here I am, I'm seeing these guys who, again, by all accounts, had nice lives. They had perfect lives. They had wonderful marriages, and they saw me, and they did not care that I was toxic or that I had this toxicity hanging around me, because what they made me to believe, what they showed me was, we've set up this cleansing station, and all you have to do is come over and we will help cleanse this toxicity off of you. And it was when I joined that group of people that I started believing in myself again. I started believing that I really was important. And when it was really like the prodigal son who was in the pig pen or the hog pen, and he comes to himself. And it is at that moment, because I'm going to tell you the honest truth, I had hit my rock bottom. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I had gone as low as I could go. I was at a point where the only other option for me was death. And so when I tell you I was fighting for my life, I really was fighting for my life. It was either I was going to survive this or this thing was going to kill me. And I was at a point in my life where, I was at this point where, man couldn't help me. And it seemed like God would not help me. And so I was in a bad place. I tell people all the time, I was in this place where I felt like I wasn't fit to live, but I wasn't ready to die. I'm trying to navigate through all of this. And so it is in this moment when I'm seeing these guys and I'm having this desire to be with them, that I'm having this moment when I come to myself and I'm thinking, man, here finally are some people that care about me enough to help me make it back home. And I'm going to tell you, it was a stretch, because I had destroyed everything. Let me tell you, I've been married now. It'll be 21 years in November. I'm sorry, in November. You can spend a lifetime building a marriage, and it only takes a few minutes to destroy it. And so everything that I had built over those years, I had completely destroyed. And now I had to go about the business of rebuilding every part of it. And it was not easy, because in that time that I'm trying to rebuild my life, in this time that I'm trying to rebuild everything that I had destroyed, when I had, because in that time that I'm trying to rebuild all of this, I've got to repair myself. I've got to repair my marriage. I've got to repair my wife. And this is from a woman who has lost trust in me, who by all accounts, if you ask her, I don't know if she necessarily lost respect, because if she had lost respect, she probably not would have stayed as long as she did. But, I had damaged our marriage, and in our damaging our marriage, I had damaged her. And so I had to rebuild all of this, but there was no way that I was going to be able to rebuild our marriage if I did not first start with rebuilding myself. And the hardest thing to do is to admit your failures, especially if you are an alpha male. One of the hardest things to do is to admit your own failures. I wish that you all would at least talk to me to me a little bit, helping me, let me know that you understand what I'm saying. So the hardest thing for me was I had to confront who I was. I had to come to grips with who, I was. I had to come to grips with, what I had done. And I had to go about rebuilding that, because while this group is bringing me in, one of the things that the group could not do was, that group of men, that group of families, that group of couples could not stop me from having to face myself. And one of the hardest things for me to do in that moment was to face myself. It's almost like if you live in a house that's full of mirrors, and you would rather cover up the mirrors than to see the reflection that's coming back at you, because you just cannot bear what's staring you in the face. And for me, the hardest thing was having to confront myself, having to confront the destruction that I had laid behind me. Because when I looked back over all the things that I had done, I saw the destructive path that I had laid. And because I had caused the destruction, now I had to go back and repair all of that. But in order for me to repair all the persons and relationships that I had destroyed, it had to first start with me repairing myself. And that was the hardest thing for me. And in order for me to repair myself, I had to repair my relationship with my Creator. I had to repair my relationship with God. Remember, I told you I walked away from the faith. I was going to church every Sunday, but I was just sitting in the building. I was just there. I wasn't taking anything in. There was no transformation happening. There was nothing that was changing about me. I'm just there. I'm going out of habit. And one of the things, and occasionally, I was even preaching, if you will. And here I was trying to preach a word, but I was hurting, and not, and Hurting in the sense that I'm trying to give a word from God, but I don't have a connection with God. How in the world are you trying to give a word from God, but you don't even have that connection with God? The question is, so when a person is this deep in, how do they get back to the point of having faith in God? That's a good question. One of the things that I had to do was, in order for me to repair my relationship with God, remember, I mean, it's honestly like the prodigal son. I had to first admit where I was. I had to admit to myself that I had caused this destruction. I had caused this hurt. I had caused this pain. I had to admit that I was not right. I had to admit that, I just had to admit that I was wrong. And so I had to, in that moment, when it says that he came to himself, I believe the idea is he confronted where he was. He confronted who he was. He confronted what he had done. And he had to recognize who he was and what he had done in order for him to get up and rehearse this repentance in his mind. And so when we talk about going back home, the first thing that a person has to do to help restore this faith in God is you have to admit where you are. You have to admit the destruction that you have done. You have to admit all of this hurt that you've caused. You have to admit that you were toxic. I cannot even begin to tell you how long it took me to admit that I was not a good person. How long it took for me to admit that I was not in a good space. How long it took for me to admit that I was not right. How long it took for me to admit that I had ostracized everybody. It took a while for me to finally admit that. But in order for me to get back home, I needed to recognize where I was, and not only where I was, but who I was. And what I recognized was, I was not the person that God had created me to be, or at least I didn't feel like that person. Because, the thing that I tell people all the time is that when God created us, he looked at us and said that we are very good. And a lot of times in our broken state, we're often just trying to get back to a place where people will tell us that we are very good. And that's where the destruction starts, because we are looking for everybody else to validate that we are very good instead of the one who created us. And so that's why we get into these destructive behaviors. That's what led to a lot of my destructive behaviors, because I was trying to find people that would make me feel good. I'm looking for people who would tell me I am good. I talked about, Jada and how, when she got caught in this entanglement, she said she just wanted to feel good. It had been a long time since she felt good. And so from our inception, from the core of our being, we want to be able to hear what God said about us from the beginning of time, that we are very good. And so we get into these destructive behaviors, and we're just trying to find a place where we feel good, where people say that we're good. And that's why we get into these destructive behaviors, because we're looking for this validation from people who don't know us. We're looking for this validation from people who have not created us. We're looking for this validation from people who oftentimes are seeking validation from them, for themselves. And so, can you imagine, here are two broken people entering into a relationship, and they're trying to make each other whole. How in the world can two broken people come into a relationship trying to make each other whole when they're not whole within themselves? And so in order for me to get back to this place, in order for me to get back to this place of faith, in order for me to return to my faith in God, I had to admit where I was. I had to admit who I was. And it was when I admitted who I was that my journey really started. And so it was in that moment that I admitted who I was, and I needed to confess that to God. And I had to apologize to God, because in that moment I was angry with God. How could you have done this to me? How could you have allowed this to happen to me? You said all of this stuff about I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. I read where Paul said, my grace is sufficient. I read where, David says, weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. I read all of those scriptures, but where was the joy in my life? Where is this grace that you're going to shed on us? Where is my comfort? Where is my peace? Where are you? Seems to me that you've deserted me, just like everybody else. You did the same thing. And what I had to realize was that God did not desert me, but rather I left him. And so it was when I recognized where I was in proximity to God that I could get back to him. And so the thing that I would say to you is, to get back to that place of faith, is you have to remember that in this relationship, that in this covenant relationship between us and God, only one person moved, and that was us. And so God has been where he's always been since the beginning of time. And so in order for us to repair this relationship, in order for us to get back to this place of faith, then we've got to move back closer to him. And so I had to recognize where I was. And it was when I recognized where I was and who I was, that now I was able to get up. And when I got up, because how it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and I tell people all the time that the word there is walk. I had taken up residence in this valley. I was cool with allowing death to come. I was just going to sit there and I was going to wait for it. And I was going to wallow in my despair. But I had to get up, and I had to clean myself off, and I had to decide to make the journey back. The problem with making the journey back is it's a lonely journey. It's a hard journey. It's a tough journey. And the reason the journey is tough and hard and long is because on the way back, you have to pass all the mistakes that you made. You have to pass all the bad decisions that you made. You have to pass all the people that you hurt. You have to pass all the people that you destroyed. And so the journey becomes hard because you've got to come face to face with all of that stuff that you messed up. The question is, does this past feeling still affect you today, or have you moved on from it? Hope I have the feelings that I had. I'm totally past that. The emotions, like last week, the emotions when I think about it are still real. I don't even, this is the first time I've told this story in over 10 years. And so I'd stopped telling the story, because in telling the story, in my mind, I was thinking I was helping people, but really in me telling the story almost all the time, it was becoming a crutch. And so I one day, I was telling the story, and I said before the crowd, I said, this is the last time I'm telling that story. And I had not repeated that story until last week. And so do the feelings still affect me? No, because in my going home, I dealt with those feelings. In my returning back to who I was, I dealt with those feelings. Me healing on the journey back home helped me to deal and put those feelings in right perspective. Are the emotions still as raw as they were then? Absolutely. When I think about it, and what's pertinent to that question that you ask is, it took me a long time to get to a point where I forgave myself. There's a verse of scripture that says, you love your neighbors as you love yourself. And a lot of times the way that people treat you is a demonstration of how they feel about themselves. And so in order for me to get to a point where I was truthful about my emotions with people was I had to admit how I felt about myself. And so what I had to learn to do was I had to learn to love myself all over again. I had to tell myself that I was not as bad as I had made myself out to be. And so I had to get to a point where I loved myself again. And the only way, and this is the God's the honest truth, the only way that I could get back to loving myself was I had to reestablish my relationship with God. And I'm going to tell you something. The thing that helped me reestablish my relationship with God was, I had people again that were in place that were praying for me, that were interceding for me, that were caring for me. And so it was because of what they were doing external to what I was doing that really helped me bridge my relationship, with God. And then after I bridged my relationship with God, I could get to a place then where I could begin to love myself. And so I had to learn, honestly, I had to learn how to love myself all over again. And it was when I learned to love myself. Now, remember, all of this is happening, loving myself, realizing who I am. All of this is happening while I'm taking this walk back home. I didn't wait until, I got that all together to start the journey back home. I was doing that along the way. It's almost when you read about, Jesus healing the 10 lepers, it says as they were going, they were being healed. And so I had to start the journey back home in order for that thing to turn. And so I recognized where I was. I was honest about where I was. I was honest about who I was. I got up from where I was and I started to walk back home. And I'm confronting all of the hurt, all of the pain, all of the despair, all of the despondency, all of the depression, all of the hate. I'm confronting all of that. It's like, you've gone through this once and now you've got to go back through all of that again. But in order for me to go back, but in order for me to return back to where I was, I needed to confront all of that. The question is, do you feel that experience made you better? Or, oh man, without a doubt, I am better now than I was then. I certainly that experience made me stronger. Certainly that experience made me that experience made me better, a better person. That experience made me stronger. And the other thing that experience did was that experience helped me to have empathy and sympathy for other people that are going through a spiritual struggle. That's why I'm not I don't readily condemn people for what they are doing or what they have done, because I've been there and I know how real that spiritual struggle is. And so what this has done is it has made me to be able to have a greater compassion for people because I've been there. I'm not, and I'm not a guy that does not, because I preach, I don't preach from a place of ignorance, if you will. I'm not some guy who has not sinned, but I'm preaching to a sinful people. I'm not a person who does not recognize that I did not have sins, and I'm trying, and that's why I don't come to this thing as if I am perfect, because I'm not. I remember where I came from, and I remember what helped me to get to where I am, because my fear is if I don't recognize and understand where I came from, I'll slip back into that place. And can I tell y'all, the scariest thing for me in life is to ever go back to where I was, because I never want to be there again. I never want to be in that place, because I'm scared if I ever end up back there, I won't make it out alive this time. And so it has certainly made me a better person. It has made me really appreciate where I am, because I could have died. I could have lost everything, because spiritually, mentally, emotionally, I had. And while I had lost it, he didn't take it from me, if that makes sense. I had lost it all, but he didn't take it from me. And so I was able to have it there in front of me, and I was able to reestablish it. And so, yeah, it made me, definitely made me stronger, made me a better person. And I think, that God had me go through this and helped me to make it out on the other side, so that I would be. He didn't take this. I didn't go through this, because I don't want to necessarily say that God took me through this, even though as I look back on it, God had put in place a lot of things that helped me to overcome it. He didn't allow me to go through this without me being better. I believe, and this is just me, that if God felt that I was not going to be better when I came out of this, he would have allowed me to die in it. And so, when I look back now, hear me when I tell you this. Am I where I want to be? God, no. I still got a whole lot of growing to do. I still have whole lot of stuff that I need to work on. But I can tell you, where I was 17 years ago, I'm certainly not there. And I'm glad I'm not there. And so, my journey back home required that I confront a lot of things. Um, and one of those was, I had to confront where I was. And that's why when you hear me now, I'm big on forgiveness, because there were a lot of people that forgave me, even when I would say, they didn't have to, but they did. And that's why I'm big on forgiveness, because number one, God forgave me. He could have had justice. He gave me grace. He gave me mercy. He helped me. My family forgave me. The last person, the last person to forgive me was myself. I was the last person to forgive me. And if I'm going to be honest, there are some days that I don't know if I've totally forgiven myself. Because every now and again, that period of time comes back to my memory, and I start to feel, you know, bad. But I don't dwell on it. And so, there are some times when I don't think that I've totally forgiven myself. Um, but the last person to forgive me, was me. And so it required me recognizing where I was. It required me getting up from where I was and started making the travel, back to the house. And what I like about this, because when I look at the story of the prodigal son, he left publicly and really shamed the family, because when we read the Bible, it's an honor and shame society. He really shamed the family because he left so publicly the way that he did. And the way that he left is the same way that his father received him. He left publicly, and his father received him publicly. In the same way, I want y'all to understand that I didn't do a lot of this stuff in the box. When I tell y'all I was doing destructive behaviors and I was acting out, I was acting out. But just as publicly as I acted out and did all of these destructive behaviors, it's just as publicly as people forgave me and received me back. And that meant so much to me. But the thing that saved me really was God allowed me to meet a group of young married adults that were demonstrating love for each other, that had love for themselves. And it was when he introduced me to that group that body of people, and they accepted me in, that I started to really get back home. And so here I am, 13 years later, and I'm grateful that I did not die in that struggle. And so I'm well over time, man. I appreciate y'all listening to my story, and my thing to any of you out there that's having a struggle, you're thinking about walking away from the faith. Maybe you have walked away from the faith. Maybe you're struggling in your faith. Maybe you are walking away from your family. Maybe your family is in turmoil. Maybe you're not loving yourself. Maybe you're not feeling your best. What I'm telling you right now is just hold on. I know it's cliche, but hear me when I say this, and I'm going to end on this. Weeping does endure for a night, and joy does come in the morning. I need you to do like I did and just hold on until you can see the sun come up tomorrow. And if you will hold on, if you will keep holding on for every sunrise that God gives you, you'll be able to find your way back home. I want you to know it's not going to be easy. But I can't speak for anybody else, but I'm here to tell you, I'm here to help you in your journey. And I'll walk with you. But you've got to keep holding on for every sunrise, because every sunrise will bring you closer to your recovery, and you can start your journey back home. God bless y'all. Thank y'all for being with me. I hope in some small way that I've helped somebody from about hearing my story. And thank y'all for being with me. And we'll see y'all next Friday. God bless you.